So when we first started racing, way back even before we started using or racing quarter midgets, I had no idea at all what I was doing. And what I loved about the car, I didn't really like the car that much, but what I loved about the car was that I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to think about the engine. I didn't have to think about tires. I didn't have to think about setting up. All I had to think about was telling Eli to just hit the gas, find your lane, and go. And it was a great opportunity. As much as we didn't really like it, it was a great opportunity for him to learn the craft of driving a race car. But then it came to racing quarter midgets, a whole different world, one that I was completely intimidated by. Because honestly, I don't know a lot about physics, and I don't know a lot about mechanics, and I don't know a lot about cars, and I don't really understand the internal workings of a small engine. And I didn't take any of those classes in school, and I really just didn't get into it as a kid all that much. And so for me, it was a complete learning experience. And even when he first started as a rookie, you're going so slow that it really doesn't matter that much. You can use older tires, and you can use equipment that's a little bit older, and you get away with some of those things. But as he graduated up to the competitive classes, I noticed that it wasn't his driving that was causing us to not be in victory lane. It was actually a lot more to do with setup and how I was doing with the car, not so much him. And what I realized is there's a multitude of things. And if you're familiar with racing, you understand this. And if you're not, I'll give a little bit of an explanation. Is one, you've got tires, and most people understand that new tires are better than old tires. Okay, we got that. And you can gain 1/10 or even 2/10 of a second per lap on new tires. Well, that's cool. But there's also spring rates, shock valving, cross weight, rear end weight, left side weight, where you're putting your weights in the car, how much weight is actually on the car, the total weight, tire pressure, gearing on your engine and your axle, ride height, how much the car is tilted. There are so many little tiny pieces of the puzzle that one thing goes wrong and you're completely off. And it could mean the difference between a podium finish and mid-pack or even last place. And in fact, that just this past weekend, we sort of really discovered that. So I've been working really, really hard trying to dial the car in the best that I can. Yes, we are waiting on new cars and we're almost there, and we're on a little bit older equipment and we're trying really hard to make sure that he's competitive. But I've been working particularly hard at trying to get it right. And my wife and I have all these kinds of conversations, just like, well, what should we do? And what this and this and this? And we just keep going back and forth about what we should do. And so this past weekend, we were racing with some of the absolute most competitive, best drivers in the country. The club that we were racing down here in Charlotte was just, the talent was incredible. The cars were incredible. And it was just a great experience for all of us to race with some of the best. You know, I was always told as a kid, if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And that's how you get there, is by competing with the best. And so the feature race is going on, and I'm watching him go around the track, and he's losing some spots. He's trying to keep up. The car's falling off. It's not doing that great. And we're noticing the car is a little bit what they call tight. So it's having a hard time getting around the corner. And we're noticing that as he is going around the corner, his left front, which is the inside, is actually coming up off the ground a little bit. Now that can happen a little bit, and that's okay. If you get enough speed to wrap the corner, that's an okay thing. But as the race is going on, that wheel is getting a little higher, the wheel's getting a little higher, wheel's getting a little higher. He got a little bit wonky, and all of a sudden he's riding on two wheels, what they call bicycling, all the way through the turn and down the backstretch. And he saved it. He didn't flip, put the car back on four wheels, kept going. Now they of course call a caution. I have to make the adjustment or he can get disqualified. And we did, and it worked out okay. But It was one thing. I made one adjustment, one tiny little thing. I turned a little knob on a shock 2 turns one way, and that changed the entire percentage of weight on the car by 2 or 3%. And that changed a ton of things for him, and actually allowed him to finish the race successfully, and we had a decent finish. One thing. It lacked one thing, and that was it. And there's so much of that just blows my mind, because it couldn't be perfect because it lacked one thing. And that's a lot of how life seems to work. If it lacks one thing, it can't be perfect. And so as I'm sort of just reflecting on the weekend and kind of how things went, I started to think that, gosh, interestingly enough, that's kind of how our faith works. And then I looked at the passage that I wanted to talk about, and I came to actually one of my favorite verses, one of my favorite passages. Now, I want to read my favorite verse first, and you can find it in Matthew chapter 5, and it's verse 48. I love the verse. It almost makes me angry, but I love it, and I've researched it, and I've just dug into it a ton, and even still today, I found something a little bit new with this that I did not previously know or totally understand until I looked back and thought about racing, thought about perfection, thought about completion, thought about something lacking versus something being totally complete and perfect. Jesus says in verse 48, "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." And that's always bothered me, because I'm thinking, be perfect. I can't be perfect. Why would I be perfect? We're not supposed to be perfect yet. We're going to be perfect later. That's sort of the whole thing with salvation and glorification and sanctification. I can't be perfect now. I'm always going to be a sinner, and someday I will be. Yeah, so why is Jesus telling us, why is he telling an entire crowd of people on the Sermon on the Mount to be perfect? Because your heavenly Father is perfect. So be like God. But I'm not like God. I can't be God. That doesn't even make any sense. We have to go back and read the rest of the context to figure out exactly what Jesus is trying to say here. So let's jump back up to verse 43. "You have heard it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what are you doing out of the ordinary? Don't even the Gentiles do the same?" Now here it is. "Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." So that's what Jesus is trying to tell us. Let's break this down. Love your neighbor, hate your enemies. No, not quite. Love your neighbors, yes. Hate your enemies? Not so much. How about instead of hating your enemies, we love our enemies and pray for those who persecute you? Because honestly, and I'm going to give you my translation, honestly, guys, what good does it do you? What out of the ordinary kind of faith could you have if you are just like everyone else? If you just like the people that you like, and you hate the people that you don't like, and you only hang around people that you like. I mean, this is a fundamental problem, because you have Gentiles in one corner, you have Jews in another corner, and Jesus is setting up something that you're going to see happen in Acts after he ascends, is a church becoming something for everyone, not just the nation of Israel. If you love those who love you, what reward will you have? The tax collectors do the same thing. The worst people that they could possibly imagine do that. So how are you better than them? And if you greet only the brothers and sisters, then what are you doing out of the ordinary? Because our faith is designed to be extraordinary. It's out of the ordinary. It's different. It's nothing like this world has ever seen. So do that. Because if you don't, you're lacking something. If you don't have that kind of a faith that's out of the ordinary, you're lacking something. What are you lacking? You're lacking the love that Christ calls us to as believers. That's what you're lacking. So don't do that. If you're going to not lack anything, then you need to love as Jesus calls us to love. And that love requires you to do something that's wildly out of the ordinary. And that thing is love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. That's what it means to not lack anything. And so, yes, I may be able to put a race car out that lacks a whole bunch of things, but it's never going to be perfect. And we're never going to be perfect. And we're never going to be the complete people that God has designed us to be, fully pushing toward the purpose that He has called us to, if we don't have the faith that He asks us to have. And that faith is faith that is completely out of the ordinary. It's extraordinary. It's different because we love different, because we treat people different, because we do things different. So here's the thing, and here's what I want you to think about today. One, I want you to go back and I want you to read and reflect on that passage again. But I want you to think about the people that are in your life. And I want you to just take a second and think about the people. You have to name them all. But for every single one of us, there are people that are easy to love. They're easy. They're just like people you just want so much to be around. And what we do as people is we gather ourselves around those who are like-minded, those that we like, those that we get along with, and we love that and we think that's great. And that's okay. But the opposite part of that is then we often tend to avoid people that we don't like. We're like, nope, I don't want to be around them. They're too difficult. They're too draining. It's a negative vibe. They're toxic. And honestly, there are some people that are toxic and you shouldn't go around those people, and you need to decide that for yourself. But there are those people who are they're just hard. They're just hard people. And you're just like, I don't want to be around them. And sometimes that's our family. Sometimes that's our friends. Sometimes that's our kids. And sometimes our kids say that about us. Sometimes we make it hard to be around us. I want you to think about those people. Not the people that are easy, but the people that are difficult. I'm not saying they're your enemies. Now, you might have some enemies, but I just want you to focus. Let's just take one step at a time. And let's focus on the people that are just difficult. How do you love them better? How do you love them better? How do you intentionally reach out to them? Intentionally let them know that you're there. Intentionally be a part of their lives, even if it's difficult, because that's the kind of love that God calls us to. And I know that's hard because it's easy to just avoid people that drive us nuts. And then when you've done that, then it's time to sort of graduate to the level of, okay, there are people that are just my enemy and I don't like them. And I might even use the word hate. I know we're not supposed to use the word hate, but sometimes we do in our heads and we're just like, nah. Think about those people and love those people, because that's what we're called to do. The goal of our faith is to be complete, is to be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect. And the only way we can get there is by not lacking anything. And the way that we don't lack anything is to love our neighbor, yes, but also love our enemies and pray for those who persecute you. If you like what you see and you love this channel, I would love for you to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, share it with some friends, sermons every week, talking about Jesus, talking about the racetrack, talking about how those two things connect. And, just talking about what we're doing on the road, being missionaries at the track each and every week for the NASCAR Youth Series and all the local and regional events that we partake in with our family. We'd love for you to continue to follow along. Like I said, subscribe, follow, send it to a friend. Thank you so much. Until next week.